Hello, free people of Earth, and welcome to This Week in Tyranny, the most hardcore news show on Earth. A weekly program about authoritarianism, government overreach, and global injustice. Live from Chicago, Illinois. If tyranny is not at your doorstep, that's because there is someone in the street keeping it at bay.
We murdered my man like it was okay. For the life he ended, he got suspended with no pay. But if a man would've took the cop life, he would've got life and never again see the street lights. And that's right.
Welcome. I am your host, Conrad Rogas. Welcome to This Week in Tyranny. This is episode 31 of This Week in Tyranny. Today is Friday, July 7th. So, the summertime is up and running. We're in the heat of it now. And speaking of the heat, this episode will be about the hot weather, the global heat, and the record that has been set this week. This week has been the hottest, by global average, the hottest week in recorded human history, right? 4 consecutive days from Monday to through Thursday, the record has been set for the hottest day in recorded human history, which is only 44 years. So, take it with a grain of salt. Yes, we've only been keeping track for 44 years. But this gives me an opportunity to talk about the following topics, right? I'm going to talk about the toxic relationship between humans and nature. I'm going to talk about the tyranny of the environmental agenda. And I'm going to talk about a solution for how to fix both problems. Because I realize that many people listening to this may know about the environmental agenda. So I may be talking to people who already agree with me. So I'm not going to spend too much time talking about the science and talking about climate change, but I will get into that. But the main idea is I want to talk about the emotional factors behind it, the psychological factors, and therefore to give a solution for how we should go about talking to people moving forward, right? But anyway, I have to mention that it is unofficial, right? So whatever measurements they are using to record this temperature, it is unofficial. There are different scientific institutions that are looking at this, right? So it may not even be the hottest 4 days in history. And also, they look at the global average. So when you average it out, it wasn't that hot over here, okay? By where you are in Chicago, it was much hotter 2 years ago. So when they take the global mean, there are a lot of different factors that go into that. So it sounds a lot worse than it is most likely, but we'll talk about why it sounds like that. What does it sound like? So the rhetoric and the messaging is that this is a combination of human-caused climate change as well as El Nino. Now, for those that don't know, El Nino is the warm phase of a cyclical weather pattern of multiple years, multiple decades. This is a ongoing cyclical pattern that causes global changes in temperature and rainfall. Okay, so in the Pacific, basically, when they say we have El Nino, that just means that it's the 50% that causes warm air to rise in the southwestern Pacific, and then that brings the temperature over through North America and different parts of the world, and then there's a whole cascade of effects that happens, right? So no doubt that has contributed to why the world is warmer right now this week. And they also say human cause, right? Now the human cause side is interesting because of the kind of evidence you would need to prove causation, that human behavior can cause a weather pattern change, an actual weather patterns, weather patterns where there are so many variables, I know you've heard about correlation doesn't prove causation. How much proof would need to be required to actually prove that causation? Maybe the same kind of proof that would be needed to prove that a new vaccine would be safe and effective, right? Something to think about. And what is the evidence now? Because there's evidence, they say, that this is human caused. So what is the evidence for humans causing climate change? Okay. Now that evidence mainly comes from the idea that it's been shown that it's not just the coming from the sun. Okay, so basically the evidence that humans are causing climate change is that there has been evidence that the sun isn't causing it. And the way they've arrived at this conclusion is because they measured the temperature of the different parts of the atmosphere, and it has been shown that the higher parts of the atmosphere are not getting warmer compared to the part of the atmosphere that we live in, which is like near to the surface, right? The troposphere, it's called. Now that's getting warmer, and the other layers of the atmosphere are not seeing a corresponding rise in temperature. So they extrapolate that to say that, okay, since things are getting hotter over here, then that means our activity is causing it. Okay, that's a big jump and a big assumption, and it does not prove that humans cause climate change. It only eliminates one factor, that the sun is not causing it, and really it doesn't even prove that, because we'll look at that. So they say that because the intensity of the sun is not causing the climate change, then they say it's humans. But there's a whole gray area there of other things that could be causing it, right? So what are some other non-human factors that can cause climate change, right? Volcanoes. Nobody's talking about volcano activity. Nobody's talking about long-term, undiscovered things that we have not discovered yet. I'm talking about galactic and planetary climate cycles. Long-term cycles that would need thousands and thousands of years to even see, and maybe we wouldn't even see it there. What are called circadian rhythms. Well, what are the circadian rhythms of the galaxy when it comes to planetary bodies inhabiting it? Okay, and along those lines, planetary and galactic magnetic activity. All this science is very rudimentary and Newtonian. They're not talking about magnetism. Well, what are the changes in the Earth's magnetic field that could be causing heat, right? Because clearly the magnetic field is what causes the atmosphere and really what holds this planet together. Okay, it's the magnetic field. So they're not looking at that. And then sunspots and sunspot cycles, because it's been shown that the heat of the sun is not affecting climate change, but that evidence comes from that they measure the actual light, the heat radiance, the light radiance coming from the sun. Okay, but that's not less sunspots. So it's been shown that higher radiance of light energy does not cause the climate change, but not sunspot activity that comes from the sun. And more work is coming out about how important sunspots are and sunspot cycles, right? Now, this is well known to many people, but those are not the narratives that are coming out, okay? But I'm going to go even further, okay? All those things likely play a part, right? But I'm going to go further. Let's assume that all those solid arguments that I just made are false. Let's throw those out. Let's say that none of those things cause climate change. Sunspots don't cause it. Volcanoes cause it. Changes in the magnetic field don't cause it. Long-term planetary cycles, none of that causes anything. Let's say that climate change is 100% caused by human activity. That's still not proof that it's the kind of activity that they say it is, okay? The messaging we get, the narrative we get is that it's from burning fuels and oil and gas, right? Burning fuels. But what about the electromagnetic grid of radiation that we're laying down here, okay? With higher and higher intensity electromagnetic radiation, right? And no research really being done about the health effects of that, because we don't want to hear about the health effects of that, because we're not going to turn our Wi-Fi off, okay? But we got the electromagnetic grid, the heat from power plants, from nuclear power plants. You drive past one of these places over here in the western suburbs outside of Chicago, You drive past and it's like a river, and there's just steam coming from like the surface of a lake, like a big lake. People don't think about how much heat is coming from nuclear energy, from all our energy production, right? And then industrial runoff, deforestation that's been shown to that causes climate change too. And the big one, animal agriculture. Not only the carbon dioxide, but the nitrous oxide and the methane, and there are all sorts of statistics. I may drop them in this video of how much just farming animals, keeping them for meat, for mass meat production, how destructive that is to the environment, and how much that is causing an increase in temperatures. And then you got your destructive agricultural practices that people don't talk about. People don't talk about the way we actually plow the crops, how that actually destroys the nutrient content, and all these different practices that are only for money and for just pushing out mass production. The destruction in the Earth's nutrient content is going to be invariably tied into the temperature of the Earth, but I'm going to get into that. And then also you have non-biodegradable waste like plastic. So, it wouldn't be an episode of This Week in Tyranny if I didn't talk about the occult. Last week I talked about occult numerology, and this week I'll talk about some occult science. So let's talk about plastic, right? Every molecule on the Earth is connected to the sun, because the sun is our battery that is an interconnected system. Okay, every molecule that we have within us is connected to the sun. It's entangled to the sun. So when some molecules become plastic, they turn into plastic chemically and become non-biodegradable, which means they cannot be recycled. Well, they're no longer part of the natural cycle of the renewal of life, right? So they're no longer part of the natural life cycle of evolution. So you've created dead weight, and you've created more dense molecules, and more dense molecules of dead weight require more energy from the battery, which is the sun. Okay? That's why you're going to get a hotter sun. You're going to get a hotter earth. Not sun. You're going to get a hotter earth because of the energy that all the molecules that are here are requiring. Okay? Because it's an imbalance towards entropy. We have an imbalance towards entropy as opposed to syntropy or negentropy or negative entropy, depending on different researchers called that concept a different thing. The ordering force, the centripetal force in the universe, different researchers call those different things. It's been called syntropy as well. But those who study real occult science, they know what kind of mentality causes dryness and heating. It's not just the sun. A mentality causes this. Our mentality causes this. It's been actually proven and shown that patriarchies cause deserts and droughts. And if you think that sounds like way out there or weird, look at the treatment of women along the equator. Look at the countries. Look at all of them. What are the kind of cultures that are along the equator? How do they treat women? Brazil, Peru, to Central and Northern Africa, the Middle East, India, China, right? And this is all because, why does it cause that? It's because of the mental rejection of the feminine essence that results in a reduction of the amount of water that can form because the molecules are not touching, okay? It's a mental distancing, and I strongly recommend to anyone, I recommend Dan Winter's work regarding this, okay? And along those lines, that's the claim I'm making about plastic. I'm saying it's going to increase temperature by significantly altering the aggregate weight and density of the dead weight in the planet's atmosphere. And our atmosphere is, for most applications, a closed system. So if we have more stuff here that's more dense and needs to get heated like plastic, that's what's going to happen. Now, if there's any biologists or scientists watching this, they could probably laugh and say, oh, that guy doesn't know what he's talking about. Well, these are not students of occult science, okay? I'm not ruling out regular mainstream science, regular Newtonian science, regular biology. I try to stay on top of those things because they're part of it. But so is occult science, right? But nobody's talking about that stuff, so I'm talking about it. So, those are all the other human factors that can cause global heating, right? But is anybody telling those mega corporations anything, right? Are the militaries of the world going to go carbon neutral and stop invading other countries? They're not. They focus on you, the individual. They focus on your car, your stove, your heater, your lawnmower. Even though in the grand scheme of things, it's like our effect on the environment is like totally insignificant compared to mass production, okay, and major operations. We do nothing. We do nothing to cause this. But they want your freedom. They want you to embrace deprivation like a cult member. They want you to embrace that you're not going to do anything, that you're not going to do what the master does, and the master gets to do all that stuff like a cult member, to choose scarcity over abundance. Okay? Now I'm saying they a lot. Who is they, right? Because when you look, I've noticed that there's these climate change alarmists, they're not so often like individual groups, like concerned scientists, like young activists, idealists, or even like animal welfare groups or vegans. Like partially there are those groups, but really not anymore. I'm noticing it's the EU, it's like the European Union, it's the United Nations, it's the governments of the world, and it's these global institutes and think tanks that are pushing this messaging out there. That's who's controlling this narrative. So that's how you know it's about enslavement. Yeah, this is not about science. And see, they're further along the way in their monopolization of medicine. So when they launched the pandemic out, it was not that easy for you to argue that, because they had that pretty locked down. They had that pretty tight. They don't have the ideology, the religion of environmentalism in the people's minds yet. So it's very important for us to fight back against this. And if we're seeing that, if the United Nations tells me the sky is blue, I'm gonna have to look up and check. You know what I'm saying? Like, we need to really be aware of what kind of claims they're trying to make, and we need to shoot holes in it as soon as possible, because they're going to, through repetition and through time, change what people accept as truth, and then they will impose on us another dominant force in the worldview domination, and they're going to have a monopoly on science, which they are close to having already. And speaking of science, I just spent a lot of time talking about the science, and this is kind of the problem. This is what we get stuck in. We get stuck in arguing the science. Once we figure out the facts, we want to start having a conversation with the people who are not on our side, with the people who are supporting government and institutions in these debates, and we get stuck in that, and then we don't get the desired results. And it's the same thing when you're arguing. If you are to argue climate change with somebody who believes in what the government is telling them about it, you realize they don't really care about the earth, right? The people you're going to talk to that aren't going to believe you. It's the same thing like arguing about masks and transmission during the pandemic. Now, was that effective? Was that effective arguing, if you knew all the scientific facts? Did you convince one person who looked at the information you provided them and they said, okay, I think you're right, based on some research, right? It wasn't effective, because what happens is you argue and argue and argue all your knowledge and all your research that you worked hard to develop and acquire, and you realize by the end of the conversation that you have not convinced the person of the truth. You haven't changed his mind at all. And what actually happens somewhere along the line is you realize that they no longer care. They stopped caring somewhere in that conversation. And here's why. It's because their attachment is to the institution and worldview that gave them their belief. Because that's what they care about. They don't care about the true origins of the breakdown of nature. They don't care about the true origins of human illness, right? They care about their ideological leaders being right and anybody that's an opponent of theirs being wrong. And that's the extent of their scientific and mental acumen. And that goes for scientists too. There's a lot of, high IQ, super dumb scientists, mental midgets when it comes to their ability to think about systems, People's ties to mainstream institutions prevent them from listening to new information. They evaluate truthfulness based on how close they think you are to their ideological superiors, their God, right? So if you look like, maybe you might be looking like the newscaster or somebody that might be from their political party, they might listen to you. They might think, oh, man, that guy knows what he's talking about. But as soon as you find out you're a conspiracy theorist, or you're somebody that questions the narratives that have been getting pushed for decades and decades, they stop listening to you. They won't listen to you at all. And you know why? Because deep down they don't respect you, right? They don't respect you, okay? So they won't take you seriously if you don't agree with mainstream science and mainstream media. So, about respect, what I'm about to say right now is my personal opinion. So I'm not saying this is factual, okay? It's my opinion. You may be different. I'm a flawed human being. So for me, about respect, if someone doesn't respect me, there's no interaction. Like, I'm not even gonna waste my time. I respect all human beings, even like order followers and evildoers and really nasty people who are essentially my enemies. I still respect them, because every human being has their own traumas, their own experiences, and ultimately their own free will, right? So I have a basic respect for all human beings, but there's these people out there that have that level of like arrogance, who are gonna like talk down to you, like they don't even see you. So for me, when I see that, fuck them. I'm not even gonna talk to these people. I'm not gonna try to help them. They could burn here. They could go down with this shit. I'm not helping them, because respect is so important. And as I was preparing this show, I realized that with this climate change stuff, there's so much to talk about, and I visualized like myself explaining this to somebody, and it's just like, okay, where is going to be the disconnect? What are the issues that are going to come up? And I'm realizing that in these debates, these people just don't respect us. It doesn't matter what level of knowledge you have. It doesn't matter what communication skills you have, what experience you have. You could beat them anywhere on the chessboard intellectually. You could take down all their arguments. You could give them a tapestry of information. You could put together everything, analyze everything, bring it all together, connect it with their individual life, and they just say no thank you because they don't respect you. So that was my personal opinion. Now, back to the evidence-based research and systems analysis. What I usually do, I don't actually speak my opinion too often in these shows. I'm talking about factual stuff. So when you're talking to people about climate change, yeah, you should know the facts. You should explain the science. Of course, we need to know that. We need to be well versed in that and be able to communicate it. But I think you have to explain the fact that they're being manipulated. There's no going around that. There's no way to extricate the idea that, hey, institutions are lying to you, and ultimately that the world is slavery. It's like that has to be part of the conversation, because often the disconnect is that people cannot just grasp the devious nature of it, the mentality, the diabolical mentality that these institutions would want to lie to them and hurt them intentionally. Many people just cut off there, because once they see that the only possibility for what you're saying, for that to be true, the only possibility that could be true is if somewhere along the line there's a psychopath in charge, and that is the reality. So maybe I would ask, do you think Henry VIII wanted the best for his people? Did Alexander the Great just, think Macedonia was going to be the best for the people of Earth and they're going to turn the world into a utopia, and that's why he invaded all those nations and conquered them? to turn it into like some place of harmony. No, it's for self-interest, right? Well, the old power structure is still in effect, right? It's been distributed throughout the mainstream institutions of the world, but ultimately it's still greedy landowners ruling over the poor peasants. So why would we entrust the welfare of the earth to the people who've always been poisoning it and poisoning the people? Why were these people to be trusted? So it needs to be explained to them that if they really want to do the right thing, they need to explore further. And what I mean is, look at the real cause, not hydrocarbon burning. If hydrocarbon burning by individuals is truly the thing that causes global warming, which it isn't, but if that was the thing, then you have to ask, why are individuals stuck living a lifestyle that requires them to engage in such a practice? Why are we consuming so much that we have to burn toxic fuels all the time? And the answer to that is because we, the slaves, are not allowed to develop new technologies. This is old technology we're using. The car, the combustion engine, the diesel engines. This is an old rudimentary system. These bullet trains in Japan run on magnetism. Land vehicles could do the same if there was research and infrastructure and time put into it. But these technologies are never developed because the mindset is poisonous. Forget the earth, the mindset of human beings is polluted. See, I say that all the time because I don't keep my head in the clouds. I look at the negative in the world. I look at that on purpose. I investigate the child abuse and where it goes. I look at the sick kids with their poor families who are never going to raise the GoFundMe to go to another country to get the treatment. I pay attention to the deception and the exploitation of people and how they see each other as just objects to be used. I listen to the mute kids with severe autism who can't speak, and if they never invented the letter boarding and the motor speech therapy to teach those non-speaking kids with non-speaking autism to actually point to the letters and express themselves, people would still think they're retarded. That's us. That's the human species, right? And then look at that. Look at all that injustice and tragedy in the world, and then look at the average person and what they're doing. When you put it that way, what makes people think this species is worth saving? It's worth saving if you're going to change and do things the right way, and that's what the great work is about. It's about building the right way, and the right way is respect. Now, we talk about the environment and nature. What's respect for nature? Well, first of all, respect for nature is freedom for every living being, including an ant. Every living being. So if an ant is not in your house and not in your way, you respect it as a unit of life. I hope everybody thinks that way, but sometimes I think that I may be one of the few, And respect is also taking care of yourself and not leaving a damn mess. So the reason I say that is, if we have to chop down 1 million forests and create permanent toxic waste, and 50,000 species have to go extinct for us to have Coca-Cola, then fuck Coca-Cola and fuck plastic bottles. We can go without them. We could just make them out of silicone or borosilicate glass. We can do that, but we can't, because we have this hamster wheel of money controlled by the central banker, thief, scammers. So yeah, we got to drink their fucking poison that they give us. So you got your central banker lying thief scammers and their criminal lying buddies that want to lecture me about respect for the environment, like they know about respect for anything, including themselves. They want to lecture us on the environment, wanting to restrict our freedom of movement and travel while we're already slaves. That's what I wanted to say. So basically, I'm going to close it with that. But about this topic, I'm actually going to do something I haven't done. I'm going to open up the comments. So, in the comment section below, I actually want to get your thoughts, because what do we really think about this? I want to know what the people who view these videos think about the environment, also the environmental agenda, and just the things I've said, and maybe about anything I've said in general, because I keep the comments off because I don't want distractions from the message. And by the way, I'm easy to reach. Like, my email is in my YouTube. It's on my website, truthandlaw.com. And I don't run from discussion, like, if anybody wants to, but here's how I see it. If anybody wants to, like, debate me, or like disagrees with something I'm saying, or wants to talk, well, you should get in the arena and talk. So I have an open challenge to anybody. If anybody wants to talk, we can go live or pre-recorded, where if like people want to call you out in the comment section, call me out on video, so we could actually make some content out of it. Okay, not just say bullshit in the comments. But that's not what this week is about. The reason I'm opening it up is because I honestly want to know what you guys are thinking, because I'm not so sure about this. I'm not so sure about who's in agreement, who's in disagreement on this topic. I haven't gotten a good gauge on what people think about climate change, in general. So, feel free to comment below, and I'll respond. But some final words that I had prepared. I don't know about climate change, but I know a whole lot about climate change going on within me. There's for sure a whole lot of climate change going on inside me. So for me, the fire of liberty is going to burn hotter and hotter, and I sincerely hope that others start feeling this way too, because ever since I started to tell the truth publicly, and thus be the real me, like 24/7, and since I could look myself in the mirror and say, okay, at least you're trying. Okay, ever since I've done this, my life has actually become like magical and beautiful. And you may not get that from my shows. This is the most hardcore news show on earth, so it could get dark, and most likely this show is going to get a lot more intense over time. But the unspoken story every week, what I don't say every week, but it is that this world is actually full of love and potential, despite all the abuse and tyranny, right? We have infinite possibility despite all the restrictions. Like, I personally am living out my own dream and calling in this world. So, and I know that once people spend more time on this stuff and develop more willpower, they're going to feel that way too. And it's going to be like the garden that grows from concrete. And that's way better than even like the Garden of Eden. That's even better than us being in harmony with nature from day one. I truly believe that, because we're going to rise from all the pollution. We're going to rise from all the toxic pollution, right? And bring in a time period where these divine principles of nature, natural law, okay, respect for each other, those principles are going to be in a state where they've never been more developed, never been spoken about openly, and never been more relevant. Because this is our story of respect and redemption. So, thank you. I'll see you next week on This Week in Tyranny.
I'm fed up with that bullshit. I'm fed up with that bullshit.